Callisto Protocol developer striking distance loses Glenn Schofield, who was the director, founder of the studio, director of Dead Space 1, went off to work on Sledgehammer. Brett Moore says, why would you found a studio then leave after one game? It sounds like it wasn't his choice. I wonder two things. I wonder, first off, if you played Callisto Protocol, and maybe they know this. Maybe there's, I don't know the behind the scenes. Maybe people were telling Glenn for over 2 years, dude, you got to work on the combat. This is not working. This dodge punch out thing. And now Crafton is saying we have a great team remaining that we kept. We have great tech. Let's now put a director that we think has a better insight into this. That could be possible. But here's why it's interesting to me. I've been, and I'm older. I think it has something to do with, aging out of what the mainstream likes. And I really believe, if you remember Mikami talking, he was talking about Resident Evil, but he says, he's talking about after 40, you realize how much energy is required when making a game. He thinks game creators hit their peak when they're in their 30s, which is when he was doing RE4. When you're young, he says you have a good sense of making things. Your energy, your heart, and stamina are better when you're young, but you lack experience. But when you gain experience, you become more efficient. However, your taste starts to fade away. So there's that sweet spot where you have both. And he says that's when most game designers, directors do their best work. And I think there's truth there. And I look at someone like Glenn, who's around my age, maybe a little younger, a little older. And it doesn't mean you can't be an older dude making great games. The guy who directed Baldur's Gate is older than me. But I do think it's a really weird thing when you think about it, because even when I do this show and I talk about things like Spider-Man falling or not, right? I mean, there's all these generations that have come after me where their own expectations of what a game is and what a game needs to be, and what is good game design and bad game design, all of that baggage, it's not bad, but it's baggage comes and expectations come with them. And I'm a guy who played games in the 70s and 80s and made games in the 90s and 2000s. And it does seem unrealistic that you would expect most people to be able to speak to the demographic of 18 to 34, which is the main group of people who play games. I'm not ageist way of the law. I'm not saying, I know you're kidding. I'm not saying they can't do it. I'm saying that it makes sense why it's hard. Even if you look at, I was looking up Todd Howard because I was like, how old's Todd Howard? Now, you guys know, I love Starfield. And he was the director, but he wasn't the lead designer writer. But, I love this game. A big reason I love this game is because it speaks to the kid who was obsessed and loved space and sci-fi in the 70s and 80s. And it's so fascinating to watch people tear up this game. And yes, you have to assume a meaningful percentage of the people shitting on this game is the whole console war stupid shit, okay? But it is still sitting at like an 80-something on Metacritic. It's not going to be most people's game of the year. There are things fundamentally that are problematic about this game for people. And it's interesting that even I'm seeing people rip Todd Howard, who for the long, I know they used to rip him about, oh, he lies, this, that, and the other, but nobody ever really doubted his skill, his ability to connect with the audience for the games he was making. And it's so weird to see that guy being torn down. I'm fascinated with Ken Levine. Ken Levine's coming out with a game that looks really cool. We don't really know much about it, but it looks really cool. I wonder if he's going to be able to... Some people can navigate it. Kojima can navigate it a little bit. His games have never been massive anyway, but certainly at an interesting level, he can navigate it. But speaking of Kojima, I saw this that Cliff posted today. He says this is a picture of him and Kojima when they went to Japan, Cliff and his wife. And he says, here's me with Kojima, who encouraged me to try once more after Lawbreaker's Tank. Now, I'm not speaking to Cliff's ability to hang in there with what's culturally zeitgeisty or not. It's not about that. But it does remind me when a lot of people ask me, they say, hey, Jaffe, go make a game or whatever. I saw this, and then later in the day, I saw this. And I'm not going to, well, maybe I'll play it while we're talking. This was a green light video from, I don't know how many years ago, that we did for Twisted Metal 2012, right? And the reason and it was a mode we didn't get in the game, but we were working on it. And it was, at the time, it was called like Chase to Vegas or something, right? So this is all early footage. But it was one team had a semi-truck filled with nukes, and they were trying to get to Vegas and detonate it on the strip, and the other team was trying to stop them before they could pull that off. And I just loved this fucking mode. I loved what it was about. I loved the cinematic aspect, the action movie aspect of it. I loved the, it was just the coolest fucking thing to me. And the game was filled with stuff like that. And I'm not complaining. I'm not looking for sympathy or anything like that. Same thing with Drawn to Death. There was stuff in Drawn to Death that, as somebody who was late 40s, early 50s, I thought was fucking cool. And then it came out and people were like, meh. At best, most people were meh. A lot of other people were like, oh my God, keep that away from me, right? So I really do think it's not about, do you still have passion or do you still have creativity? It's just about, I thought the audience would love this. And yeah, we had internet problems and stuff. But it didn't really show up. It's like at a 74, 75 Metacritic. I thought this was probably the best game design that I ever did. And so it's just, it may be more interesting to me than you guys, cause I'm going through it, but it's just interesting. It's interesting to see a lot of these other guys who were in their prime when I was in my prime, also kind of struggling to connect. And maybe that makes sense. How can you connect when you're aged out of the people you're trying to connect with? Question is, does the industry have the passion? I don't know. The industry in general? Stonerface says trends change. Look at what movies were popular 30 years ago. Right. I mean, look at Steven fucking Spielberg. Steven fucking Spielberg can barely get arrested. I mean, he can get a movie funded, but that man has not had a hit movie in ages. He put out, what was his last movie? The Fabelmans, which, no. I liked it because I love Spielberg, but that, and then West Side Story, and he did that movie called The Paper about the Washington Post, and he did the BFG. This was the guy that used to be able to put shit in theaters, and almost anything that had his name on it, it blew his fucking mind. Or in terms of box office. No, The Fabelmans did not do well at all. It was a massive flop. I get it, says Colors of Gaming. I overheard 2 younger coworkers say Zeldas before Breath of the Wild were awful. Isn't that something? I mean, it's just, it's the way of the world. It's the fucking way of the world, man. And so, it's got me thinking a lot about it. Ready Player One didn't do that well. It did great in China. But apparently, everywhere else it was like, made 180 million. It made its money back. But it wasn't a Spielberg hit. It wasn't like E.T., Jurassic Park, Raiders of the Lost Ark, Close Encounters, Jaws, Back to the Future, on and on. I mean, on and on and on. So it's just, it's really interesting. And it's interesting to watch it happen to other people as well. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit.